Hey guys, Micah from Black Bear Custom Kydex. You know what time it is. We're going to check out a couple of custom sheaths that I just built for these two knives here. These are owned by a gentleman out in Utah named Steven. And Steven sent these to me and asked me for a couple of really slick sheaths. So we're going to dive right in. But before we check out the sheath work, I want to preface that with telling you a little bit about how I blocked out these two knives. When I say blocked out, I mean basically preparing them to be sandwiched with thermoplastic so that the sheath forms with the shape and the clearance that it needs to operate the way it's supposed to. If you imagine just squeezing these in the thermoplastic and that it forms in every nook and cranny, neither one of these would be a good sheath as is. You have to prep them and you have to make sure that there's space. That's not a criticism of the knives, it's just a reality of how Kydex works. So first and foremost, let's look at the buoy. The buoy is problematic because this section of the blade is narrower than this section. And what that means is you need to find some way of bringing your two edges parallel to one another. So you have to pick which one is your horizontal edge. Typically, I would make the spine my horizontal edge, but if I do that to the spine, I've got a lot to contend with as far as making a natural looking piece of blocking that will provide the space, but also not give away the fact that, you know, that there's something essentially taped onto the blade. That's really difficult to do when it comes to grind lines. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of finesse, and doing it symmetrically is darn near impossible. So what I chose to do was to make the cutting edge the horizontal line and then fill in the window. When I say the window, I mean you have to imagine another line parallel to the cutting edge, something like that, and you fill in the window in between that line and the spine of your knife with something that matches the thickness of the spine of your blade. So that's pretty easy to do. I just used a 1/4 inch piece of MDF and then I kind of planed it down to the appropriate thickness. When I say plane, I mean I used a belt sander and just removed material to thin it out. And then I also had this area up here, the swedge, to contend with. So I just kind of, you know, got the piece fitted in there, got it sanded down to the right thickness, held it in place, and I just took a pencil, kind of air traced the curve over the swedge and then touch down on the MDF and keep that sweep going. I did that to the opposite side, and then I used the sander again to just kind of bring in the top of it until from an aerial profile the MDF matches the thickness of the blade in that area. So it's a little bit nuanced but not difficult to understand. Took a little bit of work, a little of time, but the results are all we really care about, and they came out, or the results are very nice. I'll show you the sheath obviously momentarily. You also have to block above the handle in the guard area, below the handle for retention as well as relief, and then in the choil to ensure again that there's plenty of space for the blade to draw through that narrow area. The fat part of the blade is what you're blocking for, because that's what's going to travel through those pinch spots, and if those pinch spots exist, you're going to get wear marks on your blade, or it's just not going to feel good going in and out of the sheath. Whatever it might be, it's incredibly important that you block appropriately for your knife geometry. Now, the more difficult one, or I should say at least the more time consuming, was the Commando here. So Koenscraft made both of these. This is the buoy. I don't know if it has a more elaborate name, but we're just going to call it the buoy. And this is the custom Commando. We're just going to call it the Commando. The Commando has these huge fullers on both sides. They're massive. They travel the length of the blade, basically. They're pretty wide, about 3/4 of an inch, and they're relatively deep. So what you have to do with something like this is fill that in. And essentially what I'm aiming for is for it to look like the knife has just a flat face across here, and then the two grinds going out. So it looks almost like a gladius or something like that. I don't know if that's the most close relative. I don't know. You tell me, guys, what blade does this most resemble? For me, I think the blade alone, I'd probably say it looks like a little mini gladius or something, but that's just my eye. So you block out the fuller. How do you block out the fuller? Basically what I do, I take a layer of blue tape and I put it over the face of the blade. That's to protect it from the clay. I use Sculpey, S-C-U-L-P-E-Y, Sculpey clay, and I pack it into the fuller, and then I smooth over the top. I basically use like a spackling knife or putty knife or whatever, but a straight edge over the top, so you're touching the two peaks of these grinds and flattening off or scraping off any material above them. You just kind of do this over and over until you get it nice and flat and flush. And then you use a heat gun to very lightly bake it. When I say very lightly, I mean you're not going to get anywhere near the temperature that could potentially damage the tempering done to the blade. It's not going to mess up the grain structure. I'm talking like 150 degrees is the temperature you want to get the clay to, but that's obviously not the temperature that the knife is going to get to. And it's only for about a minute. The resulting consistency of that clay goes from that kind of like moldable, leaves behind residue and your fingerprints and all that, turns more or less into like the density and consistency of a pencil eraser. So yeah, it's still malleable in a way, but it'll break apart. It's kind of, I wouldn't say brittle, but it's like dried out a little bit. It's gonna snap more than bend. So you can still squeeze it, but it doesn't have a lot of malleability. I guess that would be the better way to say it. You want it to be that texture, and then you add your other layers of tape, flip it over, same thing. Tape, clay, flatten, bake, more tape. And once you've got the blade taped out, you can wedge a little piece to block out the choil. You can tape on top and bottom of the handle, blocking to make that work, and you're good to go. So all of that was just to say, I take a lot of time and great pains to ensure that knives are blocked appropriately, so that all I have to do is press them and then cut the sheath, add eyelets, finish work, and it should be good to go. In theory, a lot of the time you'll wind up with like, oh, this is still not quite optimal. Bust out the heat gun, adjust this section of the sheath, make it work, and then you're good to go. But yeah, the prep work that goes into pre-pressing, the pre-press prep, if you can use the term, is, I would say, the single most important part about doing Kydex work. All right, so what did he ask for the Commando? He asked for a Kryptek Typhon sheath with reinforcement plates that match the handle. This is Moss Gray. It is the closest thing we've got. I had three basic options came to mind. I could use Moss Gray, I could use OD Green, or I could use Chocolate Brown. Now, obviously the green, well, it's not obvious. In my opinion, the green goes with the Typhon the best. The brown is kind of closer to the handle, but once you mix it into the Typhon, it kind of highlights the big differences between the handle color and the Kydex color. It just doesn't quite look right to me. But if you go with Moss Gray, I've said it before, I'll say it again, Moss Gray is basically OD Green with chocolate brown in it. It's pretty much a fusion of the two colors, and it's really close to a good, like a perfect color match on that. So I'm very happy with the Moss Gray, but we put it on both sides, reinforcement plate, a little bit of a double border there. I think that looks really slick, and it definitely adds quite a bit of rigidity to the sheath. Also adding rigidity to the sheath, he asked for a tech lock, but I went one step beyond just a tech lock. I put this thick, 1/8 inch thick black plate on the back. Between the reinforcement plates and this tech lock adapter plate, we are very rigid. This sheath is much stronger than it should be for being just one layer of Kydex thick. So really pleased with that reinforcement and the way this all worked out. Now, why did I add an adapter plate? This is super important, guys. The adapter plate basically functions as an intermediary to allow your tech lock to ride in a natural position relative to the, if you want to call it the breadth or the width of the blade. But as you're looking at it, if you were to put the tech lock on just through the eyelets, your tech lock would be about 1 inch off of center. You really want it up here. If you put it up here, it's still pretty far off. So you want it to ride right in that middle space there. Unfortunately, it's just too wide of a blade to make that happen naturally. So what I did was I threw that plate on there. Now, I'm not going to take the tech lock off, just I want to make this video expedient, but if you were to take that tech lock off, you would see a huge grid of a variety of different hole spacings. Let me see if I can make that show up a little bit for you. Yeah, it's kind of tough to see. Yeah, that's a little bit. So you can see those holes roughly through there. Basically, I gave a bunch of different mounting angles for the tech lock to ride at so that you can have this set up for vertical, you can turn it horizontal, and you can get about 4 different angles in between horizontal and vertical so that you're just in a good position to have a lot of options. All of them will be nice and rigid, and this should hold up very well. This is also quite low profile. If you notice, the back of the tech lock is basically flush with the handle, and honestly, it doesn't get much better than that, because if you have it pushed in too far, you're not only compressing the blade cavity, which will cause wear marks on your knife, but you're also going to have some issues with the handle coming in above the belt into your side. And then it becomes not only uncomfortable, but arguably dangerous, because when you draw up, if you have a muffin top or anything like that, that blade is going to be pretty close to scuffing you in a real serious way. So anyway, that adapter plate was a real good touch, in my opinion. Now, in addition to that, I also drilled out the adapter plate to allow one of my bulletproof Tech-Lock pivot plates to fit onto it. So Stephen, you can take this and you can mount it like so to the back of the adapter plate. So you take the Tech-Lock off, you would mount this to the adapter plate, and then you'd mount the Tech-Lock to this. And this is going to allow you to pivot your Tech-Lock between horizontal and vertical, to give you every position that the adapter plate gives you with the Tech-Lock directly interfacing on it. You're going to have every position plus basically anything else on that 90-degree swivel. Then you could also remove your Tech-Lock, turn it 90, mount it to the pivot plate again, and you've got the next 90-degree window. So 360 degrees of carry options parsed out in 90-degree sectors. But it's very, very reliable and rugged setup. And even with the Lexan or whatever, bulletproof plexiglass, whatever you want to call it, mounted directly to the sheath, which you can do, it still puts the Tech-Lock just a little bit off from this center point. So that's why I did this adapter plate. I think it was a very nice touch and arguably a necessity. So there you go. All right, so Typhon, Moz Gray, Koenscraft Custom Commando. Let me know what you think of that setup. Moving down to the Bowie, this might be, it's in the running for favorite sheath that I've done. I don't want to say necessarily all time. There have been a lot of them that I really love, but definitely in the recent past, this has got to rank up there. He told me he wants alligator skin over Kydex, a baldric sling, and a retention strap. Color choice on the Gator, up to me. He said he'd like black, but it's up to me, whatever works best with this beautiful G10 green and black handle. So guys, I tried something new, and I think it came out great. Let's take a look at it. What you're looking at here is black, barrel-dyed black Gator with barrel-dyed brown Gator reinforcement / accent plates. Now, why I did these the way I did them is because, well, two reasons. One, the black Gator was a piece that barely, just barely fit the length of the sheath. And even though it did fit the length of the sheath, both sides of it have a leg on it. So, guys, I literally had to cut the leg off of this piece of Gator and just keep trimming the opening to the leg until I could get everything to kind of squeeze in to a nice straight-ish flush line. And it's just not going to be perfect. It's really difficult to do that, and I'm not the person to like sew things together. I just don't really know enough about how to do that kind of stuff. So I'd rather not goof it up, you know what I mean? So I just, did my best to make a nice kind of seamless, well, it's got a seam, but you know what I mean? The least seamful, if you want to use that term, transition. But no matter what I did, there's always going to be a scar there on the black Gator. So what I wanted to do was cover it up with some kind of reinforcement plate. And then it also dawned on me that, you know what? This piece of black Gator just doesn't have a lot of these spines on it. It's got some, and I'm not saying it looks bad. I love the look of this stuff, but it's just not quite there. I wanted something a little spinier because that's, for me, that's like the biggest appeal with the Gator. I think it looks and feels so nice. So I took some brown Gator. I had a nice piece of back strap that otherwise wouldn't have a good use, and I cut it into 3 pieces. One piece went on a piece of Kydex. So these are Kydex plates that have Gator bonded to them. So I made a plate for the tip for both sides, bonded some pieces of that Gator to it. I think it looks really nice. And then I took another piece and I made this accent plate. Now, obviously the reinforcement plates are on both sides. Why is this piece just on one side? Well, mostly because this has some really prominent spines. That was all that was going to be left of it, were just these really sharp guys. These things are, they're brutal. So what I thought was, you know what, I'd like to just have them on the front because it's a baldric setup. This is going to be right up against your rib cage, your hip, whatever. And I know your arm dangles over here, but most of the time I think you're probably going to have sleeves on or whatever. You can also remove this plate. So if you want to spare yourself the chance of getting scuffed by those spines, you can do that. You could also take some sandpaper and just kind of lightly sand them down. If you do that, I would highly recommend picking up some mink oil paste or some snow seal, some kind of like beeswax, whatever, and just rubbing it in to those fresh sanded areas and then taking a cloth and wiping off the excess. You just want to protect it to prevent, as much as you can, prevent the moisture from getting into this. Animal skins will rot, guys, so you want to make sure that you're inhibiting that process. So yeah, that's why I only put this plate on one side, but those reinforcement plates are on both sides, and I really love this thing, guys. I haven't done this kind of thing before, the two-tone effect, and it's got the creative juices flowing for some other type things that I'm going to consider offering in the future. But anyway, let's check the fit on this. I'm very pleased. For such a broad blade, look at that clearance, guys. It's like zero contact. I mean, you're going to have some lateral incidental contact with the edges, but there's no pinch. It just goes in until that retention point, and it pops out. Ballistic draw. I love this sheath. This retention strap is just rubber coated nylon. If you've seen soft loops, it's the same exact material. I do usually use a soft loop because it's already pre-cut, has multiple distances optional, and I don't have to do anything. I don't have to use extra hardware to make one, but I also keep a spool of this stuff, and I buy the components for pull the dot snaps so that I can make my custom length ones if necessary, and in this case it was. So there you go. Now, what does that retention strap actually do? It's there as a fail-safe. It will not prevent your sheath from giving up the retention point on the knife. You can still, with enough pressure, pop that out, but you can see the guard is going to catch under there, and it's just not going to be able to move further. This 100% guarantees that while this is done, the knife cannot just fly out of your sheath. It would take an extreme amount of pressure to break through that, and if that's the pressure you're under, the situation you're in, you got bigger problems than your knife coming out of your sheath. I'm just going to put it like that. When you want to use it, it is a pull the dot snap, and unfortunately I don't have the proper snap setter to actually imbue the dot, but the dot would be right down here at the tip. So what you do is you lift up from the tip to pop that open. It's very easy to do. Same goes for putting it back on. You have to roll toward the tip onto the hub to get it to snap shut. The whole point of this, guys, is to prevent pressure from inside the loop from being able to pop your snap off. It's a very simple concept, but the mechanism is just brilliant on these things. I don't know who came up with it, but I love it. And then for the sling here, we're looking at a Beechin Tactical Baldric sling. Guys, best slings on the planet. Rifle and Baldric setups available. Please go check out Jacob over at Beechin Tactical, Exodus Knife and Tool, the Preppers Bunker Outdoors. That dude has his fingers in a lot of pies. He's a smart dude, he's a hard-working dude, and he's making some great products. So please go support Jacob over there. I absolutely love his work, and I will continue supporting him as long as he's offering his products. So, all right, guys, well, that's what we got. Beautiful American hornback alligators. I say gators plural because there are two different animals on this sheath. Beechin Tactical sling, retention strap, rubberized nylon. That's the Koenscraft buoy. And then the Commando, we have this Kryptek Typhon Mosgray reinforcement plates and a Tech-Lock adapter plate with optional pivot plate. Let me know how I did on these builds. Let me know how Koenscraft did on these two gorgeous knives. I love them. And let me know what you think of the two different carry setups. Are you a fan? Are you not a fan? For me, guys, Baldric is the ultimate. It is my favorite way to carry a camp or hiking setup because it's so easy on and off, and it just bears weight so well on that kind of system. All right, that's what I got for you. Thanks for sticking around. I know this is a long video. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Tune in for the shorter breakdowns of both of these. I will be posting those as well. And of course, tune in for the next, I guess I already said that. All right, guys, foot in mouth. God bless. Get out of here.